Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing how to set up the Dhcp server as well as configuring of the DNS server. So what you'll want to do, you're going to have to start up your server virtual machine. You're going to click on start, go to server manager because you need to add a role, and in the roles you're going to select add roles here, and you're going to select Dhcp server. I'm going to click next. Click next. It's going to ask you the IP address that's going to be used as the Dhcp server, and you're going to select next. It's going to show you the parent domain, which is sknet.com, the domain that we created in the previous tutorial, and a preferred DNS server. We're going to use the loopback address. I'm going to hit next. We are not going to be using WINS in this tutorial, so we're going to select the first option. WINS is not required for applications on this network. Hit next. And we're going to be setting up a scope, but after this install is completed. So we're going to bypass this and just select next, and we are going to disable this because we're not going to be using Dhcp version 6 stateless mode for this server, and we're going to use the current credentials. Next. This is a summary confirming all the details, and we're going to go and select install. Right, so now that this is completed, you're going to go ahead and click close. You're going to close this off, and then we're going to proceed to configure the Dhcp server. So you're going to go to administrative tools and select Dhcp. First thing we need to do is configure a scope, because there's not one assigned. You're going to see two versions, IP version 4 and IP version 6. We're not going to be working with the version 6 in this tutorial. So go ahead and use IP version 4. You're going to right click on it and select new scope. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to give the scope a name, scope A. Next, and you're going to give it a start and an end IP address. This would be the range of dynamically assigned IP address that the Dhcp server is going to be using. Just wanted to take notice that when I put in 192.168.0.1, the length of the network automatically turned to 24, and it assigned it a subnet mask as indicated here below. The 0 here indicates the host portion of the address, and the first 3 the network portion. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Alright, so there was a scope of that previously. Alright, so we're going to this section here. Right, so we're going to go ahead and click start, go to administrative tools and Dhcp. We're going to expand this, and we're going to see two things, IP version 4 and IP version 6. We're going to be working with IP version 4 in this tutorial. We're going to expand, right click, and then select new scope. I'm going to hit next and give the scope a name. Next, I'm going to start IP address, and the end IP address actually identifies the range that you're going to be using to dynamically assign IP address to host on your network. In this instance, I'm going to use about 50 addresses. You're going to see here the length of the network itself is 24 bits, and you're going to see that it assigns a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 with the 0 indicating the host portion of the IP address. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Here, this is an area that allows you to add exclusions from the IP range that you selected. It's important for this particular section to actually indicate the server address, because you won't want your server IP to be changing consistently. So we're going to include from the server, and we're just going to include 10 addresses. Going to hit add, hit next. This least time here actually indicates the time an IP address remains on a client or host before it changes. So we're going to zero this out here. We're going to change this to just 1 minute. Hit next. I'm going to select configure these options now. Next. And this is an additional option if you want to add an IP for a router used by the clients. We're going to skip this because we're not using a router in this particular network. Hit next, and we're going to skip this section here. Hit next. We're not using any Win servers. Next, we're going to activate the scope. Hit finish. Now what I'm going to do, now that this has been completed, the server is actually set up now to dynamically distribute IP addresses. If you can remember, I set up from 1 to 10 as reserved IP addresses. So for the first client that I connect dynamically to the network using Dhcp protocol, the first IP address should be 192.168.0.11. We're going to log into our Windows XP machine. And as you know from our previous tutorials, this machine was assigned a static IP. So we're going to log in here. And going to wait for it to just boot up a bit. We're going to go to Control Panel, Network and Internet Connections, Network Connections. Now, I just want to show you all the static IP. Now you're going to see here, it's the IP address. It says Dhcp is not enabled. It says no. And it shows you the default gateway, which is the IP address of the server, as well as the DNS server. We're going to minimize this. We're going to go here, go to properties, and we are going to select on properties. We're going to choose obtain an IP address automatically and hit OK and close this. Also, I want you to take note that we're not going to change the DNS server address. It's going to remain because the DNS server address is the IP address of our server. I'm going to close this off, close this off. Right. What I'm going to do here now, I am going to call the IP address again, and you're going to see there it says an IP address of 0 because the server has only started administrating the IP addresses. I'm going to refresh this again, and you're going to see here it has now taken up the IP address 192.168.0.11. As you can see, all the way to the top, there's a static IP address. The server has just begun distributing IP addresses, and here you can see the host has taken the first dynamically assigned IP address 192.168.0.1. If you look at DHCP enable, it says yes. If you would have looked before, it would have said DHCP no, and it has a static IP address. Now I am going to show you all how to set up a DNS server. I am going to close all this. So this client is now set to receive IP addresses automatically. So you're going to hit start, go to administrative tools and select DNS, and you're going to expand the server and expand forward lookup zones. You're going to see my domain here, which is sknet.com. You're going to right click on this and add a new zone. Hit next. You're going to select primary zone. Hit next to all DNS servers in this domain, sknet.com, and you're going to give the zone a name, and I'm going to call it test zone.com. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Allow only secure dynamic updates and hit next. Finish. Now you're going to go to the reverse lookup zone and you're going to add a new zone as well. And hit next. Primary zone to all DNS servers in this domain, sknet.com, and IP version for reverse lookup zone. You're going to put in the network portion ID. This is 192.168.0, and you're going to hit next. Allow only secure dynamic updates and hit next and finish. Now what you're going to do, you're going back to your forward lookup zones. You're going to right click on forward lookup zone, and select test zone that you just created, and you're going to select new host. You're going to give the host a name, and I'm just going to call it Smith. No, we're not going to call it Smith. Call it something more practical. I'm going to call it user. User.testzone.com is going to be qualified domain name you're going to see here. Right, and you're going to create an associated pointer record. Select that, and you're going to give it an IP address. The IP address we're going to give it is 192.168.0.20, and it's going to say add host, and it says the host has been successfully created. Right. I'm going to choose done. If you look here now, you're going to see user, which is host A, IP address 192.168.0.20. We are actually going to go to our server and launch NSLookup. What you want to do here is type in the name that you have created for the host. So I'm going to put in users.testzone.com, and you're going to hit enter, put in your wrong thing, delete this, and hit enter. And what you're going to see, it says the name user.testzone.com, and the IP address 192.168.0.20 is mapped to user.testzone.com. Alright, so that basically shows us where I have set up the DNS server, where an IP address is actually assigned to a domain name, and it points to that particular domain name. In my next tutorial, I'm going to be actually showing you all how to set up remote desktop on the server from a remote client. Thanks for watching.